Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of welcoming Hannah Rumsey, a writer, podcaster, and certified grief educator based in Chicago, who is the founder and director of Friends Missing Friends, a podcast and community dedicated to those grieving the loss of a friend. Hannah's journey into this work began in 2015 after the death of her beloved friend Lauren. Since then, she's been writing her way through that loss, from her one-woman show, 42 Days of Summer, to her memoir in progress, L is for Lauren. When Hannah performed 42 Days of Summer, a stranger reached out afterward to say that she too had lost a friend, and that Hannah had somehow put words to the complexity and nuance of her grief, something she never thought possible. That message helped Hannah realize that the isolation and doubt she felt were far more universal than she knew, that our stories can help and heal others, and that this work was becoming her purpose, which, by the way, is so compatible with the purpose that happened to me with Grief and Rebirth podcast. So we're so aligned. In 2023, Hannah founded Friends Missing Friends, where she now facilitates peer support groups for friend loss grievers and hosts a podcast that gives notice to that form of grief that is so often overlooked. Her mission is to make sure that grieving friends feel seen, understood, and far less alone. I'm looking forward to talking with Hannah about her friendship with Lauren, the healing moments in her grief journey that came from writing and performing her one-person show in 2020, her podcast and community dedicated to those grieving the loss of a friend called Friends Missing Friends, common patterns of doubt and anxiety in those who are grieving, and more. Some of you listening today may recognize pieces of your own story in this conversation, and Hannah's insights may offer exactly the kind of understanding and comfort you've been needing. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. So here we are, Hannah. A warm welcome from my heart to yours to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I really want, now that they sort of know you from my introduction, let's have our listeners really get to know you and the amazing work that you're doing. So can you share the story of your friendship with Lauren, how you met, what drew you to her? She had a fiery personality, it appears. And how did those 42 days you spent together that summer, how did they continue to shape your life today? I mean, it was not a casual impact on your life.
Yeah, not at all. And so I met her when I was 17 and she was 15. So she was a couple years younger than me. And I met her in the registration line of a summer camp. It was called Interlaken. We both played brass instruments. She played French horn, I played trumpet. And especially when I was a teenager, I was so shy, just had so much trouble introducing myself to people, felt very lonely. And my mom was in line with me. And I feel like before she left me alone at camp, I feel like she was thinking, I'm going to make Hannah a friend. So she tapped on the shoulder of the girl directly in front of us, which ended up being Lauren. And my mom was like, "This is my daughter Hannah. She plays trumpet." And I was so embarrassed. I was like, "Mom, I can make my own friends." But you know how certain moments just like stick in your mind? I can remember exactly how Lauren smiled when my mom said, "You two should be friends." And it was like, it wasn't a smile of like someone who was embarrassed or like, "Ugh, this lady is trying to push me onto this girl." She was genuinely so excited at the idea of being my friend. And for someone like me who was so lonely, so shy, like that smile like opened up my world. And when we went off to explore together, we immediately, it was like, it's those bonds that are so rare, but it's
Right.
when
It was a click.
an immediate click. And I feel like we knew each other in a past life or something because it was like so easy. And for those 42 days, because it was a 6-week camp, we spent every day together. And one time I actually did the math because I wanted proof while I was grieving that like we were as close as I felt. And I did the math, and the hours we spent together would have been, I think, about 10 years if we were adults who saw each other like a couple hours a week. And I needed that proof because I was like, I know we were close. I know it, but like I was doubting myself because I was like, it was only 42 days, but I'm learning time doesn't matter. Time does not
The
matter.
other
the way we
side
think it
does not matter at all. We all take a little offense at that, but it's true. We're here. It really does matter. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So let me ask you, what kinds of toxic beliefs or stories did you tell yourself about her death, and how did that complicate your grief?
Yes. So one of the toxic beliefs I had was I was so scared that she did not see me as a best friend while I saw her as a best friend. Because after she died, I no longer had that immediate reciprocation, that immediate proof that she cared about me, like where I text her and she texts me back, or I say, "How are you?" and she responds. It felt in those first, months, it felt one-sided. And I got so scared that it was all in my head. And I was like, I didn't mean as much to her as she did to me. And that became a belief that just absolutely devastated me. And it hurt my healing process because it made me focused on the wrong thing. Instead of focusing on the love between us, I was focused on the label of best friend, and like, oh no, we didn't have that label because we didn't agree, quote unquote, on that label while she was alive. And so I started to question what our relationship actually was because it didn't have that firm label. And it took me years to untangle that belief.
That sounded like how old were you at this time?
When she died, I was 23.
That sounds like a throwback to your childhood stuff, your inner child who was so insecure and didn't have the self-esteem to know that she was wonderful and this person should certainly love you too.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. I feel like I regressed to like previous insecurities. And I had someone say that a lot of times our attachment style can impact how we grieve. And at the worst of times, I'm an anxious attachment style, which is where I'm like, oh, what do they think about me? And so then that came out like a fire hose when I was grieving. And when someone named that, because I feel like naming what's happening can be so helpful. When someone said, oh, that's the anxious attachment style, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. I thought I was going crazy or something.
So a beautiful thing that helped you in understanding how you were responding to her death was that it gave you more insight into you.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
What were some more of the helpful and healing forms of support you received during this grief journey of yours? And what support felt least helpful? And I also want to ask you, just today, have you spoken or connected with her through a medium or anyone like that?
Yes. So I have been to a couple of mediums, and they they were really good experience because they confirmed what I felt already in my heart, which is that her spirit's still there. She is connected to me. But what has actually been most impactful wasn't what I heard from the mediums, but the signs that she's given me.
Oh, so cool. Like such as?
Well, one of my favorite ones, there's so many, but one of my favorite ones was, I believe it was last year on her birthday. So her birthday is July 19th, and it's also the day of her passing. So it's an incredibly
wow.
emotional, difficult day. So July 19th last year, I texted her and I said, please give me a sign. Like, I just need a sign. Because I continue to want that reassurance.
Of course you do.
After she's given me signs.
I can totally relate to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so do you know how, like, so I have an iPhone. You know how the contact photo, if you don't have a contact photo, it just has their initials in the circle. So for years, ever since I've known her, I never had a contact photo for her. It just had LB, her initials. And on her July 19th, I got a notification that said Lauren has updated her contact photo, and her contact photo was a photo of me and her together at Interlaken, and it was my favorite photo of us together, and it's still there to this day, like where the contact photo is a picture of us. And the fact that it happened at all, and that it happened on that specific day, and I feel like she was like, Hannah might question this, so I'll make sure she knows it's me. And it said,
absolutely.
Lauren updated the photo.
There are no accidents with that. They are very helpful, and they're around us. Absolutely. And I'm really glad you found out that she hasn't left your side. Basically, she's still around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I wanted to make sure I also answer the other parts of your question, which was like what support's been helpful and what hasn't. Yeah. So the least helpful support, and this has been really hard because as a society, we don't learn how to best support people who are grieving. So it's, even with the best of intentions, a lot of people say things that are hurtful or unhelpful. And some of the worst things people said to me was, I showed up to work 2 days after Lauren died because I didn't get bereavement leave for a friend dying.
Of course not.
And I showed up and my eyes were puffy. I had been crying for 48 straight hours. Like, I was just like stunned. And my coworkers knew what happened. And one coworker, she kind of turned to look at me and she said, you know, one day you won't think about your friend so much anymore. And it was like she had thrown a bucket of cold water on me. You know, it was just so shocking, her saying that. And it was also,
it was so insensitive.
So insensitive.
And did she really think your head was on her shoulders? I mean, like, really, you needed to be honored for your process.
Yeah. It was like it's the opposite of acknowledging someone's pain. It's literally the exact opposite. And feeling so deeply misunderstood. I was like, you don't understand. I'm going to think about her for the rest of my life.
Well, this woman became your motivation for doing what you're doing now and supporting people, because she was not at all supportive of you, right?
Yeah. And it was comments like that. Like, that's like an example of many different times. And I feel like it's because as a society, we're bad at dealing with grief in general, but also because friend loss grief is disenfranchised and not respected. And I feel like she would have been less likely to say that to me if my parent had died. Like, I feel like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she wouldn't have said that.
I agree with you. I've seen it also where people have different expectations and don't understand where the person is coming from in their grief.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating story. I mean, it really is so true. So you were dismissed. She dismissed you, and that really hurt, right? What pulled you out of that?
Yeah. Well, it took me a few years to pull out of the despair and the isolation. And I think what really started to pull me out was when I started to write my story. And like you mentioned in the introduction, I started by writing a one-woman show called 42 Days of Summer, which the 42 days we spent together, the 6 weeks. And it was so incredibly healing. And I had to take baby steps because first I wrote a 5-minute story. And, I had to read it in front of the class because I wrote this through a class. And I'm standing there reading my 5-minute story and I'm just bawling and you can't understand a word I'm saying, because I'm just crying. But it's like I had to get through that to then be able to tell a 10-minute story and be slightly coherent, and then tell a 15-minute story and finally be coherent. And so it's like, I feel like a lot of times, and I really was scared to move through those parts, the parts where it hurts, like every cell of your body hurts to write one, 5-minute story. But once I pushed through that and like felt those emotions, I was able to do a whole 1-hour show, which I never would have thought in a million years that I was capable of doing.
Had you done this? You hadn't done anything like this before, right?
No. No, I
Wow,
haven't.
that's amazing. And for a shy person to decide to write a show and get up in front of all those people, that's amazing.
Oh,
That's
thank
amazing.
you.
That's fantastic. So when you were writing and performing it, did any healing moments happen while that was, any synchronicities or healing moments came through while you were writing your play?
Yes, actually. So the first time I performed it, I for some reason didn't put two and two together. It should have been so obvious, but the day of my performance, I checked my phone and the date was July 19th. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course I would perform it on July 19th.
Right.
Was not, I didn't schedule that on purpose. I was like, that was her saying,
Yep.
keep going. Like, you're on the right track.
Yep.
And it was a lot of things like that, like just these synchronicities, these signs. And like you'd mentioned in the intro, I got an email after I did the show, and it was over Zoom. So a lot of people saw it over Zoom, and because it was during COVID, I got this email from a stranger, and who's now a good friend actually. But she said, like, thank you so much. I also lost a friend, and you put my specific pain into words, which I did not think was possible. And that was when I like really realized, like, not only did I get this huge unburdening from writing my story and telling my story, but I had actually also reached someone else. So it was like, oh, this is what I need to do with the pain. This is how we heal, is we tell each other our stories and we connect to each other and we go, oh, you too? That's also how I feel. Like, I'm not all alone. And it was this huge aha moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, and it really points to that we are all in this collective together.
Yes.
And you get to choose which voices you want to hear. The lady putting you down for your grief over your friend isn't the voice you want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? You want to go towards more positive people, right? So I do want to ask you also, how did your friend pass? Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, I can, because what's actually crazy is that, first I'll say this one thing and then I'll say how it happened, which is that, so she died 11 years ago. It was about 1 year ago that I realized that her death was a traumatic death, which meant that I was experiencing traumatic grief. And like I said earlier, knowing these terms of what's happening can be so helpful, because we think, oh, like, that's why I was feeling this way. Or, oh, I'm not, just making stuff up in my head. And it took me that long to learn that, like, a traumatic grief can be different than other types of grief.
What does that look like when a person has traumatic grief as opposed to what you would call normal grief? And what did that do to you?
Yes. So there's so many different forms of traumatic grief, and it happens all the time. But what it can do is it can complicate our grieving process. And it can also, and this was my experience, keep us kind of in this, where we experience trauma over and over and over. Because with her death, she was studying abroad and she fell off a balcony and died.
Oh, wow.
Which in itself, that's already a traumatic death.
Oh my God, that's so shocking for that to happen to her.
Yeah, it's shocking, it's unexpected, it's horrible.
Horrible. Where was she?
So she was studying abroad in Spain. Hmm.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So, um, can you walk us through? So now, when did you become a grief coach? When were you inspired and motivated to become a grief coach from all of this? As you're healing your stuff and you're identifying the traumatic grief and all, what occurred for you to walk through this journey of becoming a grief coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I first started doing the podcast Friends Missing Friends, and then I saw that David Kessler, who he's a grief expert who wrote the book Finding Meaning and other grief books. He was leading a grief educator certification program. And I was just immediately like, yes, I'm signing up. I'm doing that.
I can ask him my question about my grief, right?
Yes, yes. And he's amazing. I love his teaching style and his thoughts on grief. So I took his program, and that really solidified like I'm going to be a peer-to-peer support. And I think I had been kind of dismissing that, like, oh, but it's just peer-to-peer. And he said repeatedly, so many grievers seek peer support and do not dismiss being a peer and supporting other grievers. Like that's incredibly important.
It's true, and you see it more, I think, with widows groups. They're often very supportive widows groups or men. Yeah. I've interviewed people men who are forming groups, and now you're doing this dynamic, wonderful thing about people who lose their dear friends. And a lot of time, from my personal experience, a friend can mean more to you than your blood relatives.
Yeah.
They get you, they appreciate you, they support you, where your other blood relatives are like poo-pooing you, whatever the heck they're coming from. It's important to have a friend like you did. Really, really important. So I want to ask you, well, first of all, I want to give you an opportunity. So you became a grief coach after you worked with David Kessler. And now you have this podcast, Friends Missing Friends, and you have this whole community. So you want to tell us about that? Tell us about your podcast, your community, and the mission behind creating a space specifically for those grieving the loss of a friend.
Yeah. So my podcast I created first, and it was really to open up the conversation because I was like, let's talk about it. Like friend loss, I wasn't finding much media on it. So through that and having conversations with other friend loss grievers, I really learned that the number one thing many friend loss grievers are looking for is community and a place to belong. Because over and over, I was hearing from others, they could not find a single friend loss grief group. I mean, even one. And they would say they would Google it and pet loss groups would come up. Or they'd Google it and grief groups that have nothing to do with friends would come up. Like Google did not understand what they were asking for when they would Google, I lost a friend, help me, like friend loss grief group. And so after hearing that so many times and me also searching and also finding nothing, I was like, okay, like this is a huge gap that I'm going to do my best to fill so that there's somewhere for people to go. Because like That's what you beautiful. Were saying, like we need to be around people who've experienced a similar loss so that we can feel seen and understood.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you something also about David Kessler, because he talks about, instead of 5 stages of grief, he talks about the 6th stage of grief, which he calls finding meaning. So is what you're doing with your podcast and your community, the meaning you've attributed to your life moving forward?
Yes. Yeah. And he has said to clarify that it's not finding meaning in the death, but it's finding meaning in your life after the death. Because some people go, no, there's no meaning in the death, but that's not what that means. So I just wanted to make that clear. But,
no, please do. That's why we're doing this, so people understand that. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So like finding meaning in my life after the death has absolutely been creating a community that will hopefully continue to grow so that friend loss grievers won't feel alone, because I did for so many years, and dozens and dozens and dozens of friend loss grievers I've talked to have also felt alone. And I'm like, okay, so we're all suffering silently and in silos? That doesn't make sense. So that's my purpose now. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Instead of sitting by yourself crying and say, people think I'm cuckoo, you've got someone you're sitting there crying and saying, welcome, join the rest of us cuckoos. We're all in the same spot that you are.
Yeah.
All right. What common patterns of doubt and anxiety have you noticed in people grieving their friends? And how did recognizing those patterns help you in your own healing? And would you say you're basically healed or you're always a work in progress?
I think I'm always a work in progress. I think I've come a long way. Yeah, so this also, like, talking to dozens of friend loss grievers through my podcast and the groups I've facilitated really showed me how the doubts and questions that were swirling through my head are actually incredibly common. And that was questions like, were we really as close as I thought? Did she care about me as much as I cared about her? But did we know each other long enough? But was she actually my best friend? Am I exaggerating how sad I should be? And I realized that is because friend loss grief is disenfranchised. Those are the messages the external world is giving us, often subliminally. That gets internalized. And those become questions that we ask ourselves, and they become the doubts. And when I realized that, those questions lost their power over me because I understood they were coming from the outside world, not from me.
It's so important to recognize that. And that helps you to help other people when they're coming through with their same toxic messages or feelings or whatever. You can say, oh, yeah, I was there too, but right?
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't have, you don't have to see it this way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I am going to, in the show notes, we'll link you to, put your links in on the show notes because there are probably a lot of people who'd love to listen to your podcast who they probably lost friends. They'd like to become a part of this. So we've talked to sort of about how your grief has transformed and the point of healing you're in. What have you got for our listeners? Do you have any special promo or affiliate program for our audience today so that you can really get to know you and what you do and give you a chance to help them out?
Yeah. Yeah. So I created a discount code, promo code. It'll be in the show notes, Rebirth 2026 for 15% off through this whole year. And the main thing I offer right now is called the Friends Missing Friends Collective. And it's an online community of friend loss grievers so that you do not have to be alone and you can immediately connect with other people who will understand because you should not have to go through this alone.
And what is your message? Why should everybody not only not go through this alone and attach to the help you can give them, but why should people go out of their way to heal? They've had this terrible event. Instead of sitting in the swamp of it, they're to be able to use it. Why would they want to? And people who are so stuck. Mm-hmm. What is the importance of unsticking yourself and moving forward in your life?
Yeah, and I love that term moving forward because it means that we've integrated them and we're continuing to live rather than quote unquote moving on. Yeah, so it's what helped me with this is I realized for years I was thinking that in order to love her, I had to kind of contain that love within me, almost like shutting it like this treasure chest and locking it. Like if I keep it in there, then that'll really show that I love her.
Right. And it's sacred. The key is there, and I'm holding that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like that proves it's sacred. But then it was through experience and healing and like writing and reflecting and seeking help that I realized over time, actually opening that up and connecting with others was a more powerful way to express my love for her, and has actually amplified my love for her and helped me to kind of even channel it into my love for other people. So that's kind of how I see the healing and the moving forward.
Okay, and what is the Hannah tip for finding joy in life? Because a lot of people don't know that if they're grieving, they can also have joy.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true that like both can exist. And I was talking to a grief counselor just yesterday, and she had a great metaphor for this, which is that like you're like imagine an oscillating fan that's like going back and forth, and that when it's pointed in one direction, you're focused on your life and on living, and then when it's pointed in the other direction, you can really dig into your grief and your emotions. And it doesn't mean that you're ignoring the grief, and it doesn't mean that you're ignoring the life. You can kind of go back and forth. So going out and seeking joy and laughing and being in the present moment doesn't have to mean you're ignoring or pushing down your grief. And then also being in the sadness and digging into your grief doesn't have to mean that you're ignoring the joy. Like you can do both. Like you said, they can coexist.
To me, it's like you're role modeling for other people coming along. And as a grief coach, how exactly do you work? Someone contacts you, I'm grieving, I'm in trouble. What can I do? How do you work with people? Do you bring them different modalities? What does it look like from your perspective as a grief coach now?
So as a peer-to-peer supporter and a grief educator, I support not only with my personal experience, because I feel like that can be really helpful to reflect, like, yes, like, you know, I understand this is what helped me, but also as someone who's been trained in grief support and different modalities from David Kessler. I also can help people find further support, because I think it's kind of it takes a team, it takes a village to help support a griever. And so if someone comes to me, I could also say, like, what are you looking for? Like, I can help you research, because researching when you're grieving is just unbelievably overwhelming. So that's also something I want to help people with.
And they can also listen to Grief and Rebirth podcast and listen to you on the podcast. And they can also hear how other people, so many other people, have modalities to help with grief or have lived the kind of experience or worse than you have, which gives people a lot of comfort. I know.
Yeah.
So Hannah, I really want to thank you from my heart for your willingness to speak so honestly and openly about friendship, loss, and the quiet corners of grief, which offer a kind of validation too many people rarely receive. What a gift to hear your story, the uplifting meaning that emerged from it, and the healing that has come from it. I truly wish you abundant blessings.
Thank you
and as
so
I
much.
like to say, bye for now, just for now.
Oh, bye for now. I love that.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon. Until next time, many blessings.